Thanks for joining us today. Can you tell us your name and spell it, please?
Judith Sims, and the Ann is probably part of a family tradition.
Nice. Where and when were you born?
I was born in Houston, August 22nd, 1943.
And what are your parents' names?
My mother's name was Hazel Louise Anderson, and my father's name was Iris Nolan Sims.
Do you have siblings? And if so, what are their names?
I had an older sister, Kathy Davidson, a second older sister, Mary Kay Sims, Tommy Louise Sims, and Charles Edgar Sims. I am the youngest.
Nice. How far back does your family's genealogy go in known records? How many generations?
I'm not really sure. I have information that my cousins have put together, but I've just done a little bit, or have a little bit, about starting with the Swedes. And I understand it's because they were a little more affluent than my dad's grandparents, so they're not as, coherent records left about his family. They were from Oklahoma and originally from Arkansas, and they were Welsh and Irish.
Tell us about your nieces and nephews.
My sister had a set of twins, a boy and girl, Donnie and Debbie, and a second son, Jimmy, and they live in New Braunfels, Kyle, and I can't think of it, Wimberley.
Thank you. So tell us about where your Swedish family was from in Sweden, what you know about it.
I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's Smaland.
Småland.
Småland.
Yeah.
And my great-grandfather was brought here by, I thought it was Svante palm, but the article lists another palm, and Mrs. Parsons, who paid the passage. And he was a member of a group of young men that were brought over to the Elgin area, and they founded New Sweden. And my great-grandfather had a farm, and the article notes that he paid it off in 3 years. So they were pretty enterprising, from what I understand. I never knew them, and I never knew my grandparents on my mother's side. And then my grandfather was a merchant, and I believe he had a hardware store in Elgin, and then I don't know exactly when they moved to Austin, but he had a tire store at 6th and Trinity. And they lived at, I think it's 1204 West Avenue, across from the old Austin High.
Did you grow up in Houston then?
No, we moved to Wisconsin during the war, and then back to Austin. And I've mostly lived in Austin, but I've lived in both coasts.
What year did you move to Austin?
I believe I was 2, so that might be 1945.
You've been here, seen a lot of change in Austin.
Yes, definitely.
Where did you go to school?
I went to Lee Elementary, University Junior High, Austin High, UT, and I went to the University of Rochester for graduate work and Harvard University for postgraduate work.
What did you study in your university days?
Well, I studied adult education in Rochester, and then at the Harvard Institute I studied arts administration.
What are your earliest memories of your relatives that were older than you, like your grandparents or your aunts and uncles or other extended family when you were little?
Well, I remember going to the old Swedish Hill. I remember going to Gethsemane Lutheran. We went there till I was about 6 years old. And I remember that we visited my mother's aunts, Ida and Olga. She had some others, but I never remember meeting them. And they lived in that area north of the Capitol.
Do you remember what their homes were like?
They were those kind of Greek revival gingerbread looking homes. And We also went to Sunday school, vacation Bible school at Gethsemane.
What are your memories of the church?
I remember that the minister spoke Swedish.
Did you enjoy it? Did you have friends there?
I don't have very many memories. I think we did enjoy it. Then when I was about 6, we moved. My daddy was a Baptist, so we moved to the Baptist church. We thought that was more fun. So.
What would you like to share about your childhood and adolescence in Austin?
Gosh, I think there were 90,000 people living here. And we grew up, initially, we lived in houses on the east side of East Avenue. We lived in Wilshire Woods and Dellwood and Maplewood. And then we moved over to Red River and lived across the street from Hancock Recreation Center. And that was really fun. The bus stopped outside our house. We all rode our bikes all over town. And we walked to school. We didn't ride the bus because it was just a short distance away. We really roamed around. We had pretty much freedom. We spent our summers almost all the time at Shite Pool. And Mother would say, well, okay, go now. We've had breakfast. We would go over there and swim and hang out and play and then come home for lunch and then go back again and then come home when it started getting dark. We also played at Hancock Recreation Center. That was just our idea of heaven. It was just really wonderful. It was well taken care of. And, you know, we weren't supposed to play over there, but we liked to play in the creek and dodge golf balls that were, you know, zooming around. And we played a lot with the children in our neighborhood. So we were it was very different than it is now. And I was at University Junior High when Allen Elementary burned down. And then we started sharing half days with the kids from that community. And that wasn't very long, I think it was a year or so. And Austin High, there were 500 kids in my graduating class, so it was already considered large at that point. I mean, there are a lot of buildings that I have in my memory when I drive around town that no longer exist, especially in that area north of the Capitol and 19th. There were a lot of those houses were turned into boarding houses. And what is the famous restaurant that's still there, the politicians? It's a beer hall, Sagarundi.
Yeah.
Yeah. I went there with family, and then all the way through college, we went over to Sagarundi Hall.
Yeah.
I could tell you, I mean, you probably don't want to know about all these places, but there are certainly a lot of places that we hung out. And we would also, when we were in college, my brother had a good friend that played in a band at a black nightclub, and it was in the paper recently, it burned down. And we went over there, and we felt very accepted at that point. We didn't go a lot, but we would go because a friend of my brother's played in the band.
Do you remember the name of the club?
I'm trying to think of it. It was in the paper recently. I don't remember.
Not the New Orleans Club, a different one. Not the New Orleans Club. It did not.
No. I mean, people. The articles have been done about the East Austin community in recent several years have mentioned that place in particular as a dance hall nightclub that had a black ownership.
So you were saying about your aunt's houses, that was in the Swede Hill neighborhood, right?
Yes.
Before that area was redeveloped.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that neighborhood? Because that is part of our project.
Well, there were, I called them gingerbread houses, a lot of little gingerbread houses. They later became boarding houses, and some of them were still boarding houses when I was in college. And then, I don't know when the state of Texas decided to just mow down that whole area and build those granite office buildings, but I guess probably that was in the 60s or 70s. I don't remember. I do remember that we I do remember East Avenue, and I do remember the great places that we would go visit along that strip on the east side. And that was a beautiful part of Austin. It was really, there were great stores and there were ice cream places, and, we had a family Gulf station that we went to, and we just, we weren't allowed to cross to the other side. We weren't allowed to cross East Avenue, go west, as long as we stayed on the east side. So you might look, there were places that were on 12th and 15th on those corners with East Avenue before the highway was built that were just so completely authentic and charming.
Yeah, we've lost a lot when that redevelopment came in.
Yeah. My mother didn't talk that much about her parents. When her father died, she, I think that she was maybe in her second year of college, and she had to stop school and take care of her siblings and go to work. Her mother, was a homemaker, and her mother died a few years later. So she had 3 younger siblings to support. And, I think that for her, it was all pretty tragic and emotional. So she didn't really, like to talk about it much. But I do remember that we would have visitors named Swenson and Lundgren, and I can't even think of all of the rest of them. But there were a lot of Swedes that she kept in touch with, cousins. But we were pretty young then. She worked when I was the baby. So when I started elementary school, she went back to work, and she had 4 children at home. And so my oldest sister was 4, my second sister was 3, my brother was 2, and I was 1. When we were, we were close together. So she was real busy.
Yeah. What did she do for work?
Well, she worked at the Capitol. She was a proofreader, and then she also worked at the cosmetology, when the cosmetology board met.
What did your father do?
My father, in the beginning, he had his own business. It's interesting because his business was also on East 6th. It was by the Driscoll. It was east of the Driscoll, between the Driscoll, or I guess that would be Brazos, and Congress Avenue. And I have a picture of him in front of that store. And he had kind of inherited his mother made all the family clothes. She made all their sheets. She made their towels. She made everything. And so he didn't sew himself, but he hired several refugees from World War II who were tailors to work for him. So he had that business there. It was a custom men's tailoring business. And so he had it there, and then he had it in the basement of that building that's Art Deco, that's right by the governor's mansion. Anyway, then he built his own building, and the building burned down. So he lost everything. And Jake Pickle and Governor Connolly, he had been, I don't know how close of friends they were, but Governor Connolly and my daddy used to deliver dry cleaning to the sorority houses and the dormitories at UT. So they helped Daddy out. But he had to go on the road, and he started working for Beckley Carty. He worked with the public school system as a book salesman, and then he eventually went to Rand McNally. So people back then did what they had to do. They were, my parents were very hardworking. Took a lot of work to support and send 4 kids to college.
Were your family members of any community groups, or were they involved in other things besides?
Daddy was at Elk big time. I have pictures of them. Yeah. I don't know what his title was, but they have these chains and so the Elks Club.
What did he talk about in a way that meant something to him? How did he share how he valued that organization?
I just think it was a big part of his life. They would, we would go over there for cake walks and for dinner, for meetings, and They've had celebrations there pretty regularly, and it was at that time located right there east of the Capitol in the Waterloo area.
Can you describe a cakewalk?
I can barely remember. It's like you start on a number, and there's a circle, and only the kids play this to keep us entertained. And then you walk around, and when they call the number, if you're the number, it's all right, bingo, then you get the cake. I just remember that I won it more than once, and that was kind of a big deal to a 6-year-old or whatever.
Did you get a piece of cake or the whole cake?
I got the whole cake.
Oh, that's
to share with my family, of course.
That's exciting. Maybe we should have a cakewalk. Did your family have any reunions or gatherings at all?
My dad's family did. Yeah, he had 3 brothers, and he grew up in Hollis, Oklahoma, and he was the oldest. He had 1 brother that had died, but there were 3 remaining, and my youngest uncle was really good friends with Daryl and Edith Royal. And so they tell a lot of tales about my uncle. His name was Tommy Joe. My grandmother's name was Tommy. And my sister's name was Tommy. And, you know, that after he was a pilot in Korea, and then Korean War, and then when he came home, he would fly crop dusters. And Edith Royal told me that he would fly his crop duster upside down the main street of Hollis to entertain everyone or terrify them, whatever. So, yeah, we saw a lot more of them. My mother's brother, Joe, her baby brother, he and his family lived in East Texas, Lufkin, and her sister, Mary Lee, lived in Austin. So we saw Mary Lee a lot and Joe sometimes.
So did you know your mother's mother or not? And your mother didn't talk about them that much. So is this something you're learning about your family history now?
Well, I learned, you know, that their deaths were tragic. My mother never told us anything.
Nothing. Did your aunts tell you anything?
Well, my Uncle Joe's wife told my stepmother. So my mother and dad were already gone when she told us.
Got it.
And it was so sad because he was late for lunch. He usually came home from lunch. And so he was late. And so they went to bring him home, and they found him dead. So I figure he lost everything in the stock market. That's kind of what from the date of his death, we kind of figure out, well.
What happened to your grandmother, if I may ask?
She had cancer. She died of cancer. And she had uterine cancer. And back then, from what I understand, women just were very hesitant to go to the doctor. And so.
What happened with your mother?
What happened with my mother?
Yeah, what was your mother's story after she had busily raised her kids and gone back to work?
Well, she married my dad, and so, then I think she was probably already in her early 30s, so they started having kids pretty fast. And, you know, she would tell us things now. I remember that she had in her closet, she had a fur coat, she had jodhpurs and riding boots, she had a silk kimono, she had, and of course as little kids you're curious, so you're looking through your mother's, and she had a beautiful gold, big watch on a gold chain from her mother, and she had her graduation diamond ring and a little, you know, so she came from, you know, they were what's the word? I think they would call them wealthy, but they were
prosperous at their time.
Yeah.
So have you visited their monuments at the Oakwood Annex before?
Now, we may have come here, as I said earlier on the phone, you don't remember, but I thought I had a memory. But you know how, as you get older, you realize that some of your memories are just things people have told you. But I do think we came over here at least once.
Have you ever visited Oakwood otherwise, out of curiosity or for other funerals?
No. I can't tell you how many times I've driven by here, and I thought, I wonder if they're there.
Do you want to tell us anything else about your family that people 100 years from now should know, that you would like them to know?
Well, I just think it's really cool to learn about your family and your history and how hard people worked, and to think about coming from, I guess, a semi-rural environment in Sweden. I guess they had to learn English, and I'm sure they were surrounded by Swedish speakers, but that they seemed to prosper, and they seemed to do well.